www.gregdwyer.com. Now on to our show. Take it away, Greg.
Hi everyone, it's Greg Dwyer. I can't believe it's the 19th of February, 2023. So, as a reality check, you ready for this? We are 50 days into the new year. So how are those New Year's Eve resolutions going? As I said last week, most people, when it comes to February, 80% of the people that set New Year's Eve resolutions, they're not even thinking about it. So what we're going to focus on today is how to get focused and stay focused, because quite frankly, it's easy to get focused. Most people have no problem getting focused. They get focused, then they get distracted, then they get focused, then they get distracted, then they get focused, then they get distracted. The real magic is to be able to get focused and stay focused until you bring about what you're thinking about. So today we're going to talk about importance. Now last week we talked about deciding where you are, getting an understanding of where you are in your life. And we talked about diamond, D as to decide. Today we're going to get past the D and we're going to get to the I, which is importance. Now notice it's very subtle. It's very subtle. We don't start with goals. You know, a lot of times people, they set goals for the new year, or they set goals like I want to lose weight or I want to be in a relationship. People set goals and everyone talks about goals. I think goals are important. However, what we're going to talk about is what is important to you rather than goals. And I'll explain a little bit about this in a second, the reason why we do it this way. When I do my live lectures, and last year was one of the busiest times I've ever had traveling around the tri-state area, giving my presentation called The Importance of Focus. And one of the things that I do with folks is I give them a card when they come in the room, and the card says what is important. So I interrupt them. They're coming into the lobby or they're coming into the room, and I go right up to them and I say, I got some homework for you. And I hand them a card that says on it, what is important? They're like, what is this? I said, well, you came out to the lecture tonight. I just have to ask you a question. What is important to you? And the first thing that normally happens is people are like, well, I don't know. And I said, listen, here's a pen, write something down. They're like, do I have to do it now? I go, yes, do it now, because during the lecture you can focus on what's important to you. And most people resist the process. And the other thing I talk to them about is the fact that on the card is a triangle. And the triangle only has one point facing up. And I explain to them, you don't want to have 100 things that you're thinking about. You don't want to think about 50 things or 10 things. Is there one thing that is really, truly important to you? And again, people have to scramble in their brain and ask themselves the question, what really is important to me? Now, I've been doing this for many years, and I've seen great examples. Some of them are emotional. What's important to me is peace of mind. What's important to me is happiness. What's important to me is joy. A lot of emotional things. The other thing I see is family. Family is important to me, or God, or faith, or travel. So these are the kind of things that I'm asking people about. So I'll ask you, what is important to you? Think about it. Now the first reaction, if it comes up, I don't know, I get it, because most of us, we don't really think about these things. We have a tendency to get into a pattern, you know, like the movie Groundhog Day, and we continue to do things over and over again out of habit, and we don't just stop and think, hey, what's really important to me? Now here's a commercial, but it's a commercial that I think you'll enjoy. I take people on retreats, and why do I do it? Well, I figured out a long time ago, when you leave your country, or you leave your 7 days or 5 days or 6 days that you normally do every week, and you get away, whether it's Ireland or Italy or Israel or Germany or wherever it is, and you get away and you stop, you're in a different environment. And in that different environment, you can kind of think about what's important to you. So in 2009 was my first retreat. I took 50 people to Israel. The next year I took 50 people to Italy. And I got addicted to it and I loved it. But it wasn't long before I realized that travel is a metaphor, in my mind anyway, for life. Because you could have 50 people on a trip to Italy, follow me. And you tell people, listen, there's only 10 days we're going to be in Italy. You got to figure out what's important to you. Now, we hire a guide. It's a guided tour, so you don't have 100% freedom. But you do have free time. And it's the same thing with Israel. It's the same thing with Ireland. You have some free time. Sometimes you go away and you have a meal, lunch, come back, whatever. But what I love about the retreat aspect is this. There are some people on the retreat that say, you know what, I just want to relax. I want to sit in my room. I just want to chill. Maybe I'm going to journal, whatever. Some people say, no, that's not what I want to do. No, that's not what I want to do. I want to go on some sightseeing. I want to do some things that are not on the trip. I'm going to hire a guide. We're going to go away and do something really adventurous. I've seen that too. I've had other people say, no, we're going to go shopping. We're going to go shopping. Or other people get into a group and they do something as a group. Or some people, they just want to chill, you know. And as I began to see this, whether we were in Italy or Ireland or Greece or wherever we were, I made the connection that you really have to be clear on what's important to you on a trip. Especially if you leave on a Monday and the following Monday you're going to be back home in your routine. And maybe you have a few days to chill or you have a few days to go on a trip. But you have to figure out, am I going shopping today? Or am I just going to sit by the beach today? Or am I going to just chill today? What am I going to do because the trip is limited? And then I began to think about this. What about life? Life is limited too, but very few of us really ever stop to think about what really is important. So when people walk into my lecture, I hand them this card, and when I hand them the card, I'm asking the question, not necessarily to think about what their goals are. What I'm asking them to do is to think about what is important to them in the moment. Why did they come to the lecture? The importance of focus. And here's another thing that I realized. On the other side of the card, it says GregDwyerEbook.com. And again, it's a commercial. I tell people, listen, after the lecture, you can go to GregDwyerEbook.com and you can download my ebook. A little subliminal invitation for people to get my ebook, and I'll put it out there right now. You can also do the same thing. But I'm getting them to write above the line where it says GregDwyerEbook.com, and it's not a large line. It's kind of small. And I said, look, don't write a paragraph. Don't write a sentence. I want you to write a word. And again, this kind of freaks people out because they're thinking, I want to put 10 things on the line, or I want to write a sentence. Well, that's very difficult to do when you only have a little space on a card. It forces you to think about what is important in your life. Now, I also realize it depends on where you are in your life, right? If you're 70 or 80 years old, what's important to you today might be different than what was important to you in your 20s. And what's important in your 30s or 40s, again, it's all different depending on where you're focusing. So I want to ask you, what is important to you? You know, I literally can't hand you this card, but if I were to hand you this card and ask you the question, what is important to you, what comes to mind? And again, we're not starting with goals. You know, goals would be like, I need to lose 10 pounds, or I need to get into a relationship, or I need to get out of a relationship, or I need to make more money. We're asking folks to think about what is important, which really is a value assessment. Now, this is the reason why, and I promise to talk about this, this is the reason why I don't lead with goals first of all. And here's the reason why. Let's say someone says, I really want to be successful. I want to make $1 million this year, or I want to make $500,000, or I want to save $1 million, or whatever, right? And that's their goal, and that's something they write down on a piece of paper because they think that that's important to them. However, if they have a value that goes against that goal, like here's the example, like, I think money is evil. People who are rich are evil. People that have disposable income are evil. The other day, a friend of mine, Johnny, who I've known for many, many years, I said, John, what's the average income in Florida? He just moved to Florida. He goes, it's $29,000. I said, wow, that's amazing. I says, I guess it depends on where you live, Florida, New York, Connecticut. Well, the average income, and you can check this out, you can Google it, I think it was like $54,000 for a single male in America last year, right? So $50,000. So if someone gets to $75 or $80 or $100,000, and by the way, at $100,000, it's only about 17% of the population. But if someone says, I want to make $100,000, I want to make six figures, I want to be very successful. However, I really don't like people telling me no, or I don't think money is a really good thing. I think, once you get to the point where you have enough money, that's where you should stay, and you shouldn't have anything else. Now, if those values are running the show, think this through for a second, then you can set all of these goals. You're never going to hit them because there's a conflict of values. Follow me? When I first started thinking about this many years ago, I had many written goals. But the thing that was tripping me up is I had unresolved issues or unresolved values that were not congruent. I mean, the best example is when I first got into sales, and I would think this had to be 1994, 1995, and this goes back a long time. I was interested, or not interested, but I was involved in direct selling. And when I first got on the phone with somebody, my first phone call, I still remember it. I was in Ohio at the time. And I made a phone call, and I also made a pitch. And I got to tell you, I was hyperventilating. I really was. First of all, I really didn't know what I was doing, but I was really nervous on top of it. After a while, it got easier. But my point is this: if your values are in conflict with what you say you want, you're just deceiving yourself. And it's not really until you can really look at your values or your beliefs and align them with your goals that you're probably going to get any traction. Does that make sense? I think the best metaphor for me, and I mentioned this in my lecture, The Importance of Focus, and if you were there, you probably heard me talk about this, is Phil Connors in the movie Groundhog Day, right? So Phil is full of himself. All he cares about is me, 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 me. That's all he cares about. All he cares about is his career, how, good looking he is, and, all of this stuff. He wants to climb the corporate ladder. I don't think he's going to be a great best friend for you or me because he doesn't care about anybody but himself. And I don't even know if he loves himself, if you kind of think about it. But if you've ever seen the movie, it starts off with the character Phil Connors being full of himself, and then, of course, Groundhog Day happens, and then every single day is the same day. So Phil wants to climb the corporate ladder, and he wants to be successful, but what's really important to Phil is looking good, and what's important for Phil is himself. Doesn't care about anybody else. Now, what Phil tries to do is he tries to change, external changes, and nothing works. And I think the reason why nothing works for Phil is because his beliefs and his values, what he values, is in conflict with what he wants. Does that make sense? So if you watch the movie towards the end, you see that there's a shift in his beliefs. You see that there's a shift in his values. And once he shifts his beliefs or his values, and it really has to do with love, then everything in the movie changes. I mean, another example would be A Christmas Carol, right? With Scrooge. So Scrooge, I guess he gets hurt when he's a kid. He falls in love. Somebody breaks his heart, and he doesn't really want to love. He's not really into relationships. The only thing he cares about is what? Money, right? So he becomes this character, Scrooge. and he's counting pennies. He's not treating people really well. You know the story. You probably have seen it. And it's not until these three ghosts come to him, the past, the present, and the future, that he wakes up, literally he wakes up and he realizes that he must change. Any good movie is a movie from slavery to freedom, if it's a good movie. And usually what it is, it's a change of values. You know, they say they want one thing, but what they get is what they really need in the movie. And once that transformation happens, everything changes. So that's the reason why we talk about what's important to you. Like, what's really, truly important to you. Rather than setting a goal and saying, you know, I want to be healthy, or I want to be in a relationship, or I want to make money. The question is a value question. And the value question is, what truly is important to you? Now, you might sit back and say, well, Greg, there's a lot of things that are important to me. Okay, fine, but not everything. Now, here's the deal. Not everything can be important. It's impossible for everything to be important. So the thing that's important for me right now is to take a fast commercial, but I'm actually looking at my screen and it looks blank, so I'm just going to keep on going through with this. All right, so when it comes to importance, you have to understand, which I came to realize, is that everything can't be important. It's just totally impossible. So you almost have to narrow it down to a point of reference. In my lecture, The Importance of Focus, I talk about the lie or the deception of multitasking. You know, if you work today and you work for a corporation, they probably reward you for multitasking. Or even if you're not working, you probably are pretty good at multitasking. But the truth is, we really can't do it that well. Not really at all. And it causes stress. It's not good for our health. And it's not easy to multitask. And in my lecture called The Importance of Focus, I talk about the fact that every single year in America, 400,000 people get hurt simply because they're driving a car and they look at their cell phone, or they try to multitask and they end up going to the hospital. On average, we pick up our phones every single day and we tap it, we swipe it, and we click it over 2,000 times a day. The number is like 2,600 times. Now, if you're with somebody having dinner, or you're at a family meal here on Sunday, or you're with somebody and they pick up their phone and they're tapping it and swiping it and clicking it, and you went out to have a cup of coffee with them, they are presenting a message to you that you're not important. You're just not important. What's in my hand is more important than you. So multitasking, we got to be very careful, especially when it comes to relationships, I would think. On average, people that go to work Monday through Friday waste 12 and a half hours every single week because they're not focused on the task at hand. When they're at work, they're thinking about other things. Maybe they're thinking about home, or they're looking at their cell phone. But they waste 12 and a half hours every single week because they're not focused. And sadly, this is real sad, 4,000 people die every year behind the wheel simply because they're driving the car and they look down at the wrong time, and it's the last time they do that. So what is the answer to bringing things together at a point so that you're not multitasking? Well, I think it, first of all, is to recognize that you're not a computer and I'm not a computer. And it's kind of impossible to say, well, you know what, everything's important to me. Everything. World hunger is important to me. Climate change is important to me. Politics is important to me. Religion is important to me. Health is important to me. And every single child in the world is important to me. You're like, what are you going to live, 1,000,000 years? You know, you're not going to live 1,000,000 years. It's like going back to that analogy of going on a trip to Ireland or Italy or Greece. You only have 10 days. You only have 80 years. You only have 90 years. So what is important to you? That's the question that I'm asking you to think about. What is important to you when it comes to your life? Now, one of the most favorite books that I have ever read on this topic is a book called The One Thing. and it's written by Gary Keller. You probably know about Keller Williams, real estate. A friend of mine gave me this book many, many years ago, and I could not put it down. It's called The One Thing. And it relieves the temptation of thinking that you must multitask to be successful. Now, don't get me wrong, I multitask. I might be cooking dinner, doing the laundry, talking on the phone. But right now, I'm with you 100%. I'm not cooking dinner over here. Nothing else is going on. I'm giving my full attention to this. Now, you might be listening to me or watching me and also looking at your Facebook, or you might be looking at your email. I get it. This is the society we live in. We want all of this stimulation going on all at the same time, and we wonder why we're stressed out of our minds. So here's the secret. Once you discover what's important to you, make some time to make it happen. Here's an example. Let's say you say to yourself, I want to be an author. I've never written a book. People have told me I should write a book. I'm going to write a book this year. I'm going to write a book next year, or whatever. It's understanding that writing that book is really important to you and that you value, for whatever reason. Maybe you want to leave the book for your family to read, or you want to leave behind a legacy, or maybe you want to sell the book and make money. I don't know what's behind you writing the book. But you set some time every single day to do it. You don't just say, well, you know, I'm going to write a book one day. Yeah, someday I'm going to get around to writing a book. I'm not sure when I'm going to do it, but yeah, I'm going to write a book. Yeah, someday I'm going to be an author. That rarely works, unless, of course, you have a ghostwriter, right? Someone else doing it for you. The secret is to identify that writing that book is more important than XYZ. Like, what's a good example? Maybe sleeping into 9. Maybe, you know, getting up at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock before work, or maybe exercising and then getting in a great positive mood. You sit down every single day, Monday through Friday, and you just write for an hour. You're focused on one thing. Now, in my lecture, The Importance of Focus, I don't go into everything because it's impossible to get into everything. Just, there's not enough time for it. But here's a secret that I want to share with you that has really helped me, and I use it, and it's been very, very effective. I actually think I probably picked it up from this book called The One Thing by Keller Williams. I do a lot of outreach as far as getting on the phone and calling companies, because I speak for a living, so I don't wait for the phone to ring. I make other people's phone ring. And there's two things I do. I set a timer. So I have a little kitchen timer, and I simply just set it for an hour. And I'm going to set it right now. Of course, it's not going to ring because we only have a few minutes left. But I set the timer, and then I say to myself, I am not going to do anything else but one thing for this hour between 7 and 8. Now, it could be 7 to 8 o'clock at night. It could be 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't matter. I could set it for maybe 20 minutes or 30 minutes. But the idea is I'm focused on one thing during that time. So maybe what I'm doing is I'm going on the internet, I'm looking for real estate companies, or I'm looking for associations. And the timer is clicking in the background, I'm listening to it, and I'm not looking at Facebook. I'm not looking at social media. If the phone rings while this thing is going off, I totally ignore it. Someone knocks at the door, most of the time I ignore it. The idea is I know what's important to me, and then I set aside a specific time for me to focus all of my attention on that one thing. The same thing with prospecting. I belong to a group of folks that do speaking, and I don't know, there might be 100 of us in the group, I'm not really sure. It's really been a great joy to be in this group, and I posted on their closed Facebook site how many speaking gigs I did this year. Now, I'll be honest with you, last year I did 35 speaking gigs, right? And I was really happy about that. It fit into my life. It all began because I set a timer. And so someone asked me, they said, how in the world, how did you do it? How did you get 35 speaking gigs? Well, the answer is I didn't sit by the phone and wait for it to ring. I figured out what is important to me. And what's important to me is to get this message out to people. That's what's important to me. So I would set the timer every single day in the afternoon for like 2 hours. And I would make it a goal to speak to so many people every single day, Monday through Friday. At the beginning, yeah, I didn't really see that much action as far as results. But I just kept at it day after day, week after week, week after week. And eventually, I started booking events and speaking gigs or whatever you want to call them. It all comes down to knowing what is important to you. Now, I will take away the curtain and let you know there's not that many things really. In the 4 minutes that we have left, let me share with some things that are really important. Not only for me, but probably for you as well. The first one is health. Think about it. If you have your health, you might have 10 goals for this year. Or if you have your health, you might have 5 or 6 or 20 goals for this year. Say, I can't wait to do all of these things. But if you don't have your health, you probably only have one important thing to focus on, and that is to get better. When people get into their 70s and 80s and 90s, they kind of deteriorate or they have issues. People have issues as they get older. We don't live forever. So health is one of those things that I think every single one of us have to focus on from time to time. Are you getting enough rest? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting enough water? Sometimes I find myself lightheaded sometime and I say, you know what? It's time for me to drink some water because I forget. Health is important. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm not telling you what to do. But when you think about it, I think health has to be important. The other thing is relationships, whether that be your family or your loved ones or your kids or your spouse. Relationships are really important. Having people to talk to, people to support you. You don't want to go through life alone, I don't think. And so relationships are also important. Loved ones and family and friends. I think that's an important thing. If you have all the money in the world like Scrooge and everyone hates you, I really don't think that's a great place to be. So health is one thing. Relationships is another. The other one is monetary things like money or retirement. Sometimes people will say to me, I really got to get ready for retirement and I'm in my 40s and 50s. I'm like, maybe we should have had this conversation when you were 30 or 20. But again, money is important. You got to have money. Love makes the world go round, as my friend Jeffrey Combs used to say or still says, but money pays for the trip. So health, relationships, money, looking at your bank account, those things are important. Emotions. A lot of times when I do my lecture, the importance of focus, people will come back and they'll fill out the card and they'll say, what's really important to me? I want to be happy. That's what's important to me. I want to be happy. And then, of course, is career. Think about it. What do you want to do in your life? What purpose do you want to pursue? Do you want to make a difference? One of the reasons why I do this and also the lecture called The Importance of Focus is because I want to make a difference. I want to kind of shake people up and say, multitasking and trying to focus on 100 million things and going through life asleep and just not realizing that things are important to you, that might not be the way to do it. Rather, getting clear like a diamond and recognizing that you have to focus on something. And you might as well focus on what's important to you. So next week, we're going to talk about the A in the diamond. And the A is all about aiming towards the things that you want. And if you don't aim, you're probably not going to get there. So aiming is really important. Focusing all of your attention and focusing all of your energy on one thing. That's really important. I'm looking at my commercial and it doesn't look like I have it, so let me give you a commercial. Go to gregdwyerebook.com and download my ebook and join me next week. And I hope I gave you something to think about. Getting focused, that's really easy. Getting and staying focused, that's where the real magic is. Make it a great week. Talk to you next time. Bye, everybody.